Good afternoon, everybody, and hope you're doing well in this time of COVID. We at the Mortar School of Business and Management, in association with the Jamaica Stock Exchange, are pleased to welcome you to another in our series of public forums. My name is David McBean. I am the Executive Director of the Mortar School of Business and Management, and I am your moderator for the evening. We're here discussing corporate strategies to thrive and strive, or to strive and thrive in any economic condition. And it's our way of maintaining that bridge between the academy and business, which is indeed intended to foster that exchange of ideas. And in this time of COVID, it is even more important that we reach out to the business community to ensure that we indeed are moving along the right path and that we will come out of this successfully. I would like to, well, we'll introduce them later, but we have our speakers this evening will be Dr. Jacqueline Lecky Johnson, Yannick Page, and Michael McNaughton. Our partner for this evening is the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And I'd like to ask Mr. Andre Gooden, Group Business Development Manager, to bring some remarks on behalf of the Stock Exchange. Andre?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I noticed that your host has stopped my video, so I will press on.
No, I'll ask him to restart it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Doc. Panelists, participants, good opportunity to be here. Timely seminar put on by our faithful partners, the Mortar School of Business and Management. In the 5 minutes allotted to me, looking at the topics for the speakers, I am noticing that we have corporate strategies for, to create and grow profits. We have digital transformation, workforce and workplace. And then the big man coming with increased revenue and reduced cost. Very impressive topics, very topical. But in my 5 minutes, what I would just want to also add is that all of these will stem from the creation of a business continuity plan, which I'm pretty sure that at least Yannick would have in her presentation. But I think that one of the things that definitely need to propel survival in any business environment is a BCP, a business continuity plan. There are 7 elements, which very quickly I'll go through. It has allowed the Jamaica Stock Exchange, I can tell you, to be on all cylinders during this entire situation from March. We haven't really lost a step. The first one element of the business continuity plan is the definition of your team. Clearly define the first thing your employees would want to know in the midst of any disaster situation is who's in charge. So you create a business continuity team, which is a great way to answer this important question before any unwanted situation happens. And of course, secondly, meticulous planning. Rather than trying to figure out what needs to happen when a disaster situation is unfolding, we all need to have a detailed, meticulous plan in place well in advance, establishing your recovery priorities after a disaster actually is vital. And you can't get everything up at the same time, so you prioritize your operations in terms of what you need to get up first. Thirdly, effective testing. Every time you introduce a new product or service, you have to go back to your BCP and see how it fits in to that, and update it accordingly. By doing this, you can discover potential flaws in the plan and fix them before they cause any real trouble. Another big one in my mind is crisis communications. You have to have an effective communications team with your employees and business partners during a disaster situation. Closed user groups may or may not be available. Email in the organization may not be available. So you have to establish some touch points through which you're going to be able to touch base with all the key stakeholders. And of course, a big one is employee safety. We have to be able to reach out, and this comes back to the communication again, to be able to reach out to our team members to ensure that all is well. If there's persons that need state intervention because of a particular flood-prone area or whatever the disaster is, the only way you really find that out is by touching base and having them identify who the team leads are to touch base with in case of a disaster. Access to business resources is number 6. Establishing a remote network, computer network to use during disasters is a great idea. And I know that all of the panelists here are very familiar with that and have that as a part of their DNA, having the experience that they have and having been through so many of these situations before. And of course, possibly the biggest of them all, in a robust risk management plan, which must include continuous IT operations. We have to really look to establish offsite backups to our data that can help us to continue through any adversity with relative ease. For the most part, I believe so far in this crisis, those are the seven key elements really of a BCP that I think should come out in the discussion this evening as we talk about generating profits and maintaining stability and digitally transforming the workplace. For the most part, I think the corporations in Jamaica have done a fair job during this pandemic in terms of mobilizing their operations and remaining relevant and remaining open. Those who didn't are clamoring to catch up now and creating a lot of business for people like Michael McNaughton. But it certainly is a pleasure to be a part of this team. I urge all the participants to make sure that your organization is duly equipped with a business continuity plan, which will lead you to delivering on your corporate strategies to generate and grow profits, to transform your organization, and to revitalize through technology. Chairman, those are my comments. I am, again, on behalf of the Jamaica Stock Exchange, welcome this initiative. I actually have a radio interview scheduled for sometime around 6:45, but I'm going to hang around as long as I can, and I may pop back in later to ensure that Mr. McNaughton is behaving. Thank you very much, and I actually have a radio interview scheduled for.
Okay. Thank you, Andre, for those remarks. And you have indeed focused on business continuity as one of the major actions that any business must take, not just in its normal course, but especially in these times. Before I go to introduce our speakers, I just want to set some ground rules for the forum. So what we will do is we will have the presentations in order. Dr. Lecky Johnson, then Ms. Page and Mr. McNaughton, and we'll take your questions. All questions we would ask that you put in the chat feature, whether you're on Zoom or for those who are joining us on YouTube, welcome. Please mute all your microphones if you can. What we will do is that we will take the comments and the chats, and we will, so to aid in this, please keep your questions brief so that the technical folks can capture them as well as possible. And we will try to group together questions of a similar nature rather than answering each one. So while we may not answer your question, or you may not see your question as is, we'll be trying to ensure that we cover as much ground as possible in the time. We're scheduled to end at 8 p.m. and 7:30, and we will strive to keep to that time. So first up is Dr. Jacqueline Lecky Johnson, a management consultant, and she's with Lecky and Associates Consulting Services. Now, Jackie is an independent management consultant with over 20 years experience in driving operational efficiency for Jamaica's leading organizations. And I won't call any of them their names because they haven't paid any advertising for today's event. But she has worked for and does work with our leading companies. She is a proud graduate of the University of the West Indies and also of MSBM, one of our acclaimed DBA graduates. She has a first degree in accounting, a master's in management information systems, of course, her DBA. She's also a certified information systems auditor, a certified internal auditor, and fellow of the Chartered Association of Certified Accountants. She's recognized for enhancing underperforming areas and advises on the strategic and operational aspects of management, internal controls, and cost reduction. Jackie will present this evening on corporate strategies to generate and grow profits. And let's welcome Jackie, and we'll ask her to put up her presentation at this time.
Good afternoon, all, and thanks for attending this forum that allows me to share with you one of my passions, that is corporate turnaround, that looks at company losses and its impact on shareholder value and jobs. We are 6 months into the pandemic and its impact on company performance. Therefore, management may be engaged in trial and error to avoid company value deterioration, including employee layoffs. Global data shows that company losses destroy value worldwide. Caribbean stock exchanges losses are abnormal in comparison to developed world major exchanges. This is reflected in the Standard & Poor's Global Equity Indices, a composite measure of a country's firm and economic performance. However, do not be disheartened, as 41 Jamaica Stock Exchange companies, that is 59% of them, recovered from reported losses since the Jamaica Stock Exchange inception in 1969 to 2016, the last year captured in my doctoral research. Note, SMEs also survived. However, my research focused on the Jamaica Stock Exchange companies due to readily available data. These 41 surviving Jamaica Stock Exchange companies provide guidance as to the strategies they deploy to turn around the problem of losses. Therefore, how to thrive and strive in any economic condition if the appropriate corporate strategies are employed timely. The academic literature describes turnaround as reversing profit decline to profit recovery. This decline must be substantial and absolute in manner. Recovery, on the other hand, is the return of the organization resource base back to its pre-decline financial strength. This process to turn around a company's loss-making position to profit involves first, decline recognition, then financial restructuring if there is a cash crisis, then assessing the source of decline. Is it internal or external to the company? Thereafter, increase efficiency to turn around declining performance. Company executives, business owners, managers, and their aspirants. What is efficiency? What is the root cause of declining profits, including losses? It's efficiency. It's inefficiency. Therefore, my research has added to the work of other turnaround researchers as a clarified efficiency, that is the ratio of output to input, that is fundamental to the discourse on turnaround. Corporate turnaround efficiency is measured as return on assets, which is profit divided by total asset. Thereafter, the research looked at and tested the multidimensional nature of efficiency. There are 3 possible ways to increase efficiency, and therefore 3 possible strategies. 1, you can increase output, which is to grow revenue, and it is measured as the change in revenue from one year versus the other year. Another strategy is to reduce costs, which is measured as a change in total expenses from one year to the next. And a third option, a combination strategy, which is also to grow revenue and reduce costs simultaneously. This research also looked at the performance of all these measures in each year in the company's 2 distinct phases: decline in profit, which is noted as decline, and recovery, that is increase in your profits as the company's attempted turnaround to performance decline. This research also used a final sample of non-financial services company for which data was available, and it unearthed a strategic pathway to increase corporate turnaround efficiency. This pathway involves both decisions and actions and when they should occur. Therefore, the first assessment is done. Is the company in decline period? That is it experiencing at least 2 years of profit decline, including 1 year of loss from the start of decline? After, the company makes an assessment and a decision, is there unmet demand? If there is unmet demand, the turnaround action is to grow revenue. However, if the company does not experience increasing profit, but experience at least 4 years of and continuing negative and decreasing ROA, which is a measure of corporate turnaround efficiency, it is deemed not to have turnaround. However, there's another outcome as demonstrated by the successful Jamaica Stock Exchange companies. If the company begins to experience at least 2 years of profit before tax after time end of decline, it is now in the recovery period. Management must also look and assess, is there unmet demand and is there available slack resources, example cash? If yes, they then deploy a combination action, which is to grow revenue and to reduce costs, and thereby achieve corporate turnaround efficiency at least 2 years of positive and increasing ROA after time end start of recovery. This observed successful corporate strategy is to grow revenue throughout the turnaround cycle, that is during the decline period and during the recovery years, and in the recovery period also reduce costs. Example, through business process reviews. In so doing, reverse losses to profits by achieving corporate turnaround efficiency. This observed strategic pathway therefore provide managers guidance regarding how to eliminate costly trial and error actions, including job losses. Using the sport analogy, offense is the best defense. Therefore, in the decline period, grow revenue. Therefore, do not rush to downsize firms as an automatic turnaround response. Be open to use of growth strategies for stemming decline. Then attack and defend. Simultaneously grow revenue and reduce costs in the recovery period. Being cognizant throughout the turnaround attempt of unmet demand in the decline period and available slack resources, and unmet demand during the recovery period. Therefore, this observed strategic pathway may assist managers to transition from trial and error to the fine art of executive decision that consists in not deciding questions that are not pertinent, not deciding prematurely, and not making decisions that cannot be made effective, and not making decisions that others should make. Chester Barnard, 1938. Thank you so very much for listening to this passionate topic of mine.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. And while we wait for Yannick, just to sum up here, some key takeaways. Jackie, you said that management is oftentimes engaged in trial and error at a time like this. You spoke about turnaround strategies. Don't rush to downsize. Attack is sometimes the best form of defense. So you must attack and defend. And I liked one of the questions from the quotes from Chester Bernard. You are not to decide questions that are not pertinent. One of the Achilles heel of us as managers. Thanks, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Our next speaker is Yannick Page, Mrs. Yannick Page, the founder of Future Services International Limited and program lead, Market Entry USA. So Yannick is an award-winning social entrepreneur, certified trainer in entrepreneurship, and the creator and executive producer of The Innovators, which is a business reality TV series. And this series promotes entrepreneurship development and aims to transform small business. Yannick has received many awards and accolades, including the US-based Enterprising Woman of the Year winner, 2015. She also has a distinction of being the first Caribbean person to be awarded the World of Difference Award in November 2015 in the category of entrepreneurship. Yannick is the founder of the Young Professionals Network of Jamaica, past president of the Women Business Owners Jamaica, a former vice president of the Young Entrepreneurs Association of Jamaica, and a former executive member of the PSOJ. Let's welcome Yannick to present on digital transformation, workforce, and workplace. Over to you, Yannick.
Thank you so much, Dr. McBean. And of course, that was just such a great presentation from Dr. Johnson and before, of course, Mr. Gooden. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm not sure who is joining and from what, from where you are. So I'd like to greet everybody warmly, no matter where you are. The first thing I want to say is that from time to time, you may hear in my very brief presentation, some children in the background. One of the things that was not mentioned is that I have some bosses who happen to be my children, right? So if you hear them in the background, they're the ones who really call the shots here. All right, so I wanted to just take a few minutes and, my contribution is about digital transformation and just how that becomes really important in the space that we're in now. So I think, Dr. Johnson mentioned before just how challenging many companies are finding it. And I wanted to give some quick context, which is that, for the first time since the 1918 pandemic, what we're facing is that every region of the world is in recession. And that's important to note because in this pandemic, a lot of the work I've had to do in supporting, training, coaching entrepreneurs from all over the world is to actually go through and study every major recession since World War I. And the last major recession that the world experienced was a 2007-2008, what is known as the Great Recession or financial meltdown. And at that time, what happened was that the world, the global economy contracted by 1%. Already, the projections are that the global economy will contract by more than 3%. And what we've seen is that it is taking longer and longer over the last few years. Every time we've had a recession globally, it is taking longer and longer for the world to recover. So for example, the greatest economy in the world, the US is touted as the greatest economy in the world. It took them 8 years to recover from the last recession. And I want to put that in context because even though we are discussing strategies that should be able to have some movement here, including digital transformation and so on, we are in unprecedented times, and kind of having that data and putting it in context kind of puts us, gives us some idea as to what that recovery could possibly look like. So a few things I'm going to go through is kind of what is digital transformation, why digital transformation, who is winning at that, and of course a few key lessons for companies and corporates and so on. So a quick definition is that digital transformation is not simply automation, right? It is really radical rethinking of how companies do business, and it really is about adding value. One of the things that, you know, people will ask is, well, why would we do this digital transformation? So what it tends to do is to provide industries with unparalleled opportunities. So in fact, the World Economic Forum, which tends to be an authority in the space of digital, especially when it comes to industry, has been touting for the last few years that the future of work is digital. It is independent. It is also, you know, it is also requiring complete automation, but going further into actually looking at transformation. So here is something from the World Economic Forum that I found very interesting, which is that, you know, it used to take Fortune 500 companies 20 years to reach their dollar valuation. And in today's digital startups, they're getting there in 4. And so digital technologies provide these unique tools for companies to be able to quickly leapfrog. And in many cases, what we've seen is that, for example, in the 2007 to 2008 global recession, what we saw was that a lot of digital companies were able to really come in and completely change the marketplace. And so that's in some ways exciting, because it means that there are opportunities for companies to completely revolutionize themselves in this pandemic, right? And also post, to be able to create not just new industries, but to really be disruptive. So who is winning at digital transformation? The World Economic Forum has a really fantastic schedule of different participants that they have been tracking for several years, who've been giving them data. One of them I've highlighted is the Lego Group, because of how transformational the Lego Group has been. And I just have a little bit of data that I wanted to share with you, which is, of course, you know, there are over 100 case studies on digital transformation. So if you wanted to actually do some more research and look at this some more, you can go and go through. There are many case studies and examples, but one of the most you know, impressive one is the Lego Group, because that company, between 1992 and 2004, they had a steady decline, and that came on the heels of tremendous success and tremendous expansion. And in 2004, the Lego company was about to go into bankruptcy, right? I mean, it was really dire. And so what they decided to do was to embark on this digital transformation. Now, what that meant was not simply automation. It was not simply looking at how can we use technology to make our business better. It was really looking at how can we add value in the digital space, and how can we add value and deliver value in that way. And what they decided to do was to focus on movies. They decided to focus on mobile games. They decided to focus on mobile applications. And by 2014, the first Lego movie, again, building on this digital space and trying to add value to their audience in that way, achieved revenues of $468 million, that's US dollars, of course, with a budget of only $60 million. Since 2005, the Lego company has rebounded. You even have Legoland now, and it is seen as the apple of toys. Now imagine a company that was really going into bankruptcy at a time when the economy was actually doing pretty well. This should not have been happening, right? And they were able to, through digital transformation, really achieve some remarkable results. So a few lessons that are key takeaways, and of course, as a practitioner and having actually delivered this type of content and even consulted with technology firms and telecommunications firms on digital transformation, I think I'm pretty well placed to share with you that the biggest mistake that companies make is thinking that digital transformation is all about technology and that it should be driven by the CIO, who is a chief information officer, or the IT manager. That's absolutely incorrect. Digital transformation is about a complete culture change. It's about looking specifically at your business model in its entirety. It's about identifying where are the opportunities, not just looking at what your current trajectory is, and of course, hoping that you can then tweak your business model in a way to do things the way that you used to do before. It really is actually trying to identify new opportunities that are digital, and then actually creating your business model around delivering that value in that way. And then, of course, internally, the process is changed. So it's never a project. It's not something that's assigned to a particular team member. Whenever you see somebody saying, okay, well, so-and-so is head of digital transformation, you know the company is doing it in the wrong way, right? Because digital transformation is not a project. It is, in fact, a complete transformation that the company will be going through. And every single person has to have ownership. And that ownership starts at the governance level with actually the board, and then, of course, going through the CEO or president, or however it's structured. It is always about radical change, and of course it's consumer centered, and there's always some innovation that's driving that. So you're almost always looking at new revenue sources, new markets, new target markets to serve. And of course, I think, before Andre left, he shared a little bit about business continuity. I mean, this really is one of the best business continuity strategies, because once a company reaches maturity, it's very difficult for them to reinvent themselves. And digital transformation has been a vehicle that has allowed many companies to not just reinvent themselves, but to become hugely successful. And then the last one is, of course, that that cultural shift is something that will require some changes very often. I mean, usually find that companies are have to go through drastic change in terms of internally. There's some people who will just not fit, and so the way to leapfrog that process is to really look also at transforming what human resources looks like, because the challenge that many folks have and many companies have had is that in trying to get to this transition, the people who were there for a long time and they're used to a certain way of doing business, they are the ones who you need to be the champions of the change, and they typically struggle to do that. And so that's one of the key lessons that I think we can all take away. And then finally, one thing I want to end on is just a reminder that the IDB or other partners like the IMF and also even the World Bank, have pointed to how much we could gain in terms of economic growth, not just Jamaica, but across the Caribbean, if we were to look at implementing digital transformation. And so it's exciting, and there are huge opportunities. And of course, I hope that this was useful, and I look forward to sharing more in the question and answer if there are any questions about this.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Yannick. And my big takeaways here is that digital transformation is beyond technology. It's a different way of doing business, and it's a business model evolution underpinned by the customer and innovation. And thanks very much for that, Yannick. It's something that we talk around and not do enough of. And if we remember that technology is a tool to do business rather than an end in itself, then we can go down the path of digital transformation. So thanks very much for that, Yannick. And then We go next to the man who is batting last, Michael McNaughton. So while he starts up his presentation, I'll speak to you a bit about Michael. Michael is the managing director of the Amber Group Limited. He boasts over 30 years executive management experience in information technology, product and business development, and wealth management. So up to 2018, he was Group Vice President of Grace Kennedy's Money Services Division. So you can talk to him offline about the remittance business. He has an MBA in finance from the Manchester Business School. And Michael also sits on several boards in the Jamaica financial sector. And he's also vice chairman of the board of St. Jago High School. And I believe he's also an alumnus of St. Jago. He's an active Rotarian and has served as president and director of the Rotary Club of Spanish Town, as well as district secretary of Rotary's District 7020. I'm here to speak to us about technology, increasing revenue and reducing costs. We welcome Michael, and just to say that some pre-advance, he'll be making, I think, an exciting announcement about some things we've been discussing between MSBM and the Amber Group. So over to you, Michael, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. McBean. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, viewers and listeners from all over the world. To my co-presenters, Jackie and Yannick, thank you for charting such a path for me. I mean, the good thing about listening to your presentation is obviously technology plays a very important role in those strategies that you've just described a while ago. I'm going to start by just speaking a little bit about COVID and what that has actually caused. I mean, some of the challenges that not just businesses, but economies face as a result of COVID. At the micro level, and this basically spans all different levels of businesses, from small straight through super large businesses, locally and internationally. We've seen business lockdowns, we've seen cases of major revenue losses, receivables challenges because the consumer can no longer afford to pay his bills, cases of losses of employment, both within and without. And unfortunately, there have been a number of cases of bankruptcy. But this is not just limited to just the micro level. If you look at the macro environment, both domestic and international, you see that both small, medium, and large enterprises are also facing challenges as a result of the COVID-19 impact. There is increased unemployment, reduced levels of gross domestic product, obviously reduced tax inflows, increased social service intervention by governments, and obviously because of the lockdown of economies and countries, reduced foreign exchange inflows from both foreign direct investments, trade, and the hospitality industry. If we look at, two companies, which last year this time, they were pretty much large companies. In May of 2020, there were two headlines that actually had a profound impact on me and my team in terms of our perspective on technology. One headline spoke about Amazon, and it was built for the pandemic and will likely emerge from the pandemic stronger than ever. The other spoke about JCPenney, which filed bankruptcy pretty much within the same week. So that actually demonstrates to you that technology, Amazon that uses technology in its retail business versus JCPenney that's using brick and mortar, using their retail network, using their malls as their primary business model. They've pretty much filed bankruptcy. At the macro level, as a group, we actually have assisted not just the Jamaican government, but we have assisted a number of governments in the region to actually enable them to get through some of those macro challenges that I mentioned. So we donated to the government of Jamaica the Jam COVID website and app, which basically allowed them to use technology to manage all of the cases around COVID. Persons can report themselves, they can make appointments to go in and see doctors and get tested. It allowed for tracing. It actually enabled immigration, returning residents and tourists. And there were a number of government agencies that were beneficiaries of that. The Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of National Security, and the Ministry of Tourism. What that technological intervention resulted in is that thousands of applications were processed in the system with clear visibility by the respective stakeholders to enable returning Jamaicans and tourists to come to Jamaica. So that was an initiative that we sponsored for Jamaica. Earlier this week, it was rolled out in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And there's another island in the Eastern Caribbean where we're actually working with the government to enable the same thing. Technology. So technology in and of itself, as Yannick pointed out, will not solve our problems. But technology, when you couple it with our economic processes, when you couple it with all of the things that we've been doing over the last several decades, will ensure that it will be the next primary economic stimulus. Not just post-COVID, but going on to the future. Marketing and sales will be impacted. I mean, we all use e-commerce, we all use mobile apps. Customer care is another area that will be impacted by technology. We're talking about digital commerce, the creation of digital products. We've seen the impact on that on the music industry, using technology to improve our processes. And one area that we really need to place a lot of emphasis on is the whole question of business intelligence, using data, understanding our customers habits, understanding our customers' personalities, packaging purpose-built products for our customers. These are all things that will be enabled by technology. When we're talking about positive revenue impacts through technology, we're talking about e-commerce. The last 6 months have seen a number of businesses that have been impacted negatively because they have been closed. And even when the economies reopened, there were challenges because consumers were not necessarily comfortable going into the businesses. The protocols that exist in terms of business reopening, you can only allow 10 customers into your business place at an instant in time. So all this actually led to the traditional form of business not necessarily enabling an effective reopening of commerce. And one of the things that the Mona School of Business and ourselves are discussing is Amber Group now taking their community service down to the micro level. We spoke earlier about what we did to enable government. We're also interested in sitting with the Mona School of Business and sponsoring e-commerce capabilities for a number of small and medium-sized businesses in Jamaica. And this will be a grant, this will be free. We have the technological capabilities in terms of our team, so we will actually sit down and work through the protocol with David and his team as to how we can enable businesses to embrace e-commerce, to embrace business intelligence, to get a better feel for their customers, to know their customers better. Looking at process improvements through technology. Jackie spoke earlier about, a lot of the things that businesses should be looking to do. Well, we have to embrace technology. 20 years ago, persons would be entering stuff in a cash book and doing their bank reconciliations at the end of the month. Now with technology, you can do auto reconciliations, real time. So financial management will be so much more effective in terms of the enhancements of business operations. Technology will enable more efficient customer relationship management, enable businesses to understand who are their customers, and in understanding who their customers are, to get a bigger share of wallet. Technology also allows for the disruption of a lot of traditional industries. We're seeing what's happening in the hospitality industry with disruption from such entities as Airbnb. We're seeing what's happening in the taxi industry with the intervention of such entities as Uber, right? So traditional industries that we've all grown up seeing, we actually will be seeing a lot of them becoming disrupted by emerging technology. And similarly, we will see the emergence of non-traditional service industries. 10 years ago, I'd leave my office and I'd drive up to the Mortar School of Business to participate in this conference. Today, technology actually allows us to have this conference virtually using the Zoom platform. Participants can be participating from all over the world. So that's what technology is doing to traditional business operations. Similarly, in terms of cost cutting, we're seeing businesses that are using online chats, using bots, using artificial intelligence, where frequently asked questions, the system can answer it for you. So only questions that are pretty much new and right field will be going to a customer service representative. So the typical call center with 1,000 seats, in 3 years' time, a lot of the calls will be answered by bots. You're talking about intelligent IVRs as taking out a lot of your customer care. Right? We're talking about using technology to improve our processes and virtually reduce or eliminate the inefficient manual processes that basically is killing a lot of our back offices, right? Resulting in improved productivity, resulting in the diversion of labor up the value chain. Those menial tasks will be handled by technology, and then the personnel resources within the companies can be moved up the value chain into more important portfolio responsibilities. What we have to also appreciate, though, is even while we're focusing on enhancing our revenues and reducing our costs, we have to look at technological disruption. There are so many of these industries that, with the best will in the world, if they were perfect in terms of their revenue enhancement, if they were perfect in terms of their cost cutting, they would still be redundant today. We can look at Netflix and how Netflix has made the cinema activity pretty much redundant. We've seen how Netflix has made Blockbuster as a video rental service redundant. We've seen Uber that has the taxi industry now in a tailspin. Telecommunication, we don't even have to ask the question as to what WhatsApp Messenger, WhatsApp calling is doing to your traditional telecommunications businesses. Right? So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, technology, we have to embrace it. We have to look at our internal processes, as Yannick has said. We have to identify the internal processes that will no longer work in this new technological dynamic and remove them. At the end of the day, we embrace technology, we apply them to our businesses in an efficient way, and our businesses will be all the better for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I would like to thank Amber for the offer to work alongside with the Mortar School of Business and Management to help, in particular, small and emerging businesses. These are the people least equipped to adapt. And if we can be a catalyst in that space, that would be fantastic. So thanks for that offer, not just on behalf of the school, but on behalf of the small business community. It struck me that you spoke about disruption of the traditional industries and the emergence of non-traditional services. And technology allows you to do old things in a new way. Netflix started just like Blockbuster, Michael, but one embraced the new opportunities and the other didn't. And that is the story of technology and digital transformation and really preventing your business from going into terminal decline, if I were to wrap up all three threads. So thanks very much for your presentation, Michael, and to the rest of the panel. Now, at this point, this is your turn, those in the audience. So if you could type your questions in the chat feature, whether you're on YouTube or Zoom, and we will be able to take your questions to the panelists. So while we wait for the first question, I'll start with one mainly to you, Michael, but to all three. What happens if the businesses thrive, but the people don't? And given what we saw in the US in the last election, where the Rust Belt, which may say they were the victims of digital transformation, and they had a revolt which upended the political landscape, how do we mitigate against this? So
well, David and viewers, the cultural transformation, and I think, well, Yannick touched on it, is a very critical part of any digitalization effort, right? I mean, I have actually been part of a digitalization exercise a few years ago, right? And then what I found is the persons who you were actually asking to embrace technology, they were still accustomed to using a spreadsheet, printing it, checking it off, signing it, entering it in a folio file, and putting it in a cabinet. So that process of transformation actually requires a lot of effort. The technology is the easy part. It requires a lot of effort in terms of the transformation of persons' minds, in terms of retraining, in terms of getting them to be comfortable with technology, for them to realize that technology is going to disrupt their job, right? So these are some of the things that companies really need to pay close attention to. They need that digital czar. They need that driver who will drive the message home. It has to be embraced from the top down, else persons will not necessarily adopt it quite easily. And it will be a waste of effort.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Any, Jackie or Yannick, do you want to add anything to that? Right. All right. So what we'll do in the interim then, and thanks for that, Michael, is we have two questions. And if we can bring up the first one here. All right. So this is, I believe, from Mario McNaughton. And the question was, as we refocus digital efforts, do you believe that the majority of organizations really focus on the fact that customer expectations are also evolving? So Yannick, if you want to take this first, and if the other panelists want to chime in afterwards.
You know, I think that's a difficult question to answer because unfortunately we just don't have data that gives us any indication as to how companies are really managing. Only now we're actually seeing, like, for example, the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce come out and say what the survey of their members you know, has revealed and so on. So I think data is going to be really important for us. I would say that I think the majority of organizations will struggle. And I like to compare, I think, you know, my context is always global because, as I've shared, I've trained and coached entrepreneurs from more than 100 countries, and I work with some of the top global organizations. So it's really helpful to have that context and to see where Jamaica fits in that process. Unfortunately, you know, when you look at the fact that, you know, we have struggled in the STEM subjects, when you look at the fact that our workforce, you know, 70% of our workforce is, you know, pretty much unskilled, have no certification, we generally don't have the capacity. And, you know, added to that is that most businesses were started out of what we call necessity-driven entrepreneurship and not necessarily opportunity-driven entrepreneurship. So their focus is on how do I feed myself? And, you know, I start something that I like, not necessarily even that, you know, customer centered at the outset. So when you take those factors into consideration, you know, you know, it's highly unlikely that we are going to have an easy time doing this. And unfortunately, it puts us at a competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis not just our leading trade partners, but of course, our other partners or other Caribbean counterparts.
Thank you, Yannick. Any other of the panelists?
If I may add to that, David, what I've also found is technology and access to technology through social media has actually enabled customers to interact with businesses to interact with their customers in a more proficient way. Yannick is correct. We are not there yet. It will take us some time, but 10 years ago, it would take companies with large budgets that can do focus groups and surveys to get an understanding of what their customers want. Today, through social media interaction, persons are able to do that so much, and I won't say easier because it's not easy, but in a so much more affordable way.
Okay.
But in terms of how this, remember, you know, to actually grow revenue, it is not just looking at technology. As we transition, we can increase customer experience. So therefore, you grow your revenue. So you start with those simple things. Take the small business entity, the medium size, look at what they have on their plate to start improving customer experience. And by improving customer experience, you can actually grow revenue, and you can use your data analysis to also assist in that as you find the additional resource to invest in more technology.
Thank you, Jackie. I would probably like to add a twist to that. And in answering Mariam, great companies sometimes create customer expectations. So if you think of some of the iconic products, stretching back from Microsoft with Windows, who knew we needed a personal computer to do computing? Or that the iPod or the iPhone would become so indispensable, or that we needed to be on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok. And so there is a sense sometimes that people fall into that it is only the customer expectations. You can set expectations that people suddenly discover that something they didn't need yesterday, they really need today. And I believe, you know, Yannick touched on it a little bit about need-driven rather than opportunity-driven, and you know, making the market. So that's also another aspect that I would add to that. Okay, I think we have another question. And this is coming from Andre. Welcome back, Andre. I hope the radio interview went well. I have an old MBA. How much of this new information is part of the MSBM postgrad curriculum? Are the new entrants to the workforce coming equipped? So I think I'll have to take that question first since you asked about MSBM. And how I'd answer this is that education is supposed to give us information, but also a methodology of how to process information. So something I always cite, Andre, is that 10 years ago, there was nothing called social media marketing. But we would expect that somebody who did a marketing degree 10 years ago should be able to focus on the way in which marketing is done in a new medium and be able to adapt to this by looking at the new ways coming. So in other words, the value of your MBA was teaching you how to process information, how to adapt. And I know that you're a pretty adaptable person, Andre. So the fact is we do introduce the new methodologies, the new ways of doing things. We upgrade our curricula. So we do that for the postgrad curriculum. But what I always say to people, and as an engineer, is something I've always done something simply in life. And engineers are trained to say, look at a problem, assess the problem, design a solution to the problem, test if it works, and do the cycle all over again. And that's, in a sense, what life is about, any information is about. The other question you ask, are the new entrants to the workforce coming equipped? And that's actually the more difficult question, because coming equipped to do what? If we churn out technicians who are meant to do just one type of job, they may be ready for today's world, but we're not sure they'll cope with tomorrow's world. So we try to ensure from the business school, whether it's the undergraduates or the postgraduates, that the new entrants are in love with what we call critical thinking, curious minds. So when they come to the workforce, and this is something I believe that companies in Jamaica have to do again. There was a time when companies realized that new graduates needed orientation and training. Increasingly, we're hearing people say people come to work and they couldn't be ready in day one. We can't train for the hundreds or thousands of companies and the variations, but we can give you graduates who are ready to learn, adaptable, because in the age of digital transformation, your business should be looking different 3 years on as opposed to now. And I think that's the conversation that we need to have, honestly, between the training institutions, whether it's UWI, Mortar School of Business and Management, the other universities and colleges, with the workforce. So we understand clearly the difference between vocational training as opposed to more design training, and understand where each fits with each other. And I hope that answers the question. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to comment on that as well.
Well, the only thing that I would say to this, David, and it is actually a good question, Andre, is thankfully, information is so much more readily available now. David, when I did my first degree years ago, I'd line up in the library to get a book, and sometimes you'd have to wait weeks before you could get the book, which is a reference book. Nowadays, the information highway, the information available over the internet, companies' willingness to put case studies, real life case studies up on the internet to enhance knowledge is the norm. So, as you said, David, further study is really an enhancement of your ability to think, right? And with all the information that's available, granted, you have to sift through some of the so-called garbage out there. But I think entrants into the workforce today are so much better equipped than we were a few years ago. I'll say a few years ago.
You know, I think that's a great point. And if I could just also add to that, I would say that this mixture of hard and soft skills, you know, is exactly what we need graduates to focus on. And it is exactly what I believe the programs, many of them are able to help you to accomplish. Because when a company says, I need you to demonstrate creativity, critical thinking, I need for you to demonstrate problem solving, you can't just say you have these skills, right? And so how do you develop these skills? When I talk about collaboration, I mean, I think I just published recently that in January of this year, LinkedIn, which is the largest professional network where you're able to find these job opportunities, they posted their top 5 list of soft skills and then their top 10 list of hard skills. And companies more and more are looking for those soft skills and are willing to train up, because it is very hard to train when you have a deficit of those soft skills. So they're willing to actually train in the harder skills, and of course, as the needs change. But it's really hard to teach someone who hasn't had that exposure how to do research. I mean, Michael said it, but you take it, we can't take for granted the fact that just learning how to actually do research becomes a huge strategic advantage, because information right now is the best possible currency. So I just wanted to make that quick add.
And also just adding regarding research, that is what led me to actually do my doctoral actual research, because I saw where as a manager, we were just testing out whether we should be doing a particular strategy, and that would lead to turning around a company's loss. So it drove me to actually do my doctoral research with, and which the Mortar School of Business enabled. So therefore, MSB is relevant because it is actually more and more challenging managers, actually experienced managers, to come and do actual research, so that this and the strategies and the actions you employ, they are driven by data and it's not just off the cuff of the mill. And therefore you have more confidence. So therefore, as my presentation indicated, it would reduce trial and error in your management actions, because it has been proven based on research and not based on gut feeling and following others, but based on research. So therefore you are adding, and therefore MSB through the program, I assume the DB and other postgraduate will continue to focus on research-driven management courses.
We most certainly will. I understand we have some questions from YouTube. Okay, so Yanni, this one is from you, from Mel Thompson. As a small business, what are the essential technological elements we should focus on to establish ourselves in the digital space? Is it possible to turn social media interaction into revenue?
So let me just answer that last one first. It's definitely possible to turn social media interaction into revenue. And the truth is, social media has become that, that vehicle that many people have used to not just build what you call their personal brand. So they use it for exposure to build their brands, but it's also used as a key channel. I mean, in business, we talk about what are your customer channels that support the value propositions that you are delivering, right? So you say, okay, well, well, this here is how I'm going to deliver value. This is the product or service. And then you say, okay, well, what are the channels? More and more, social media becomes a very critical channel in that it allows you to communicate with as well as listen to, right? So you are able to share, but then you're also able to engage and to listen to your target customers. What I would also say is that when you ask the question, what are the essential technological elements? I mean, I think you really have to look at your business model, and you have to start looking at externally, what is the environment like? What are the trends? And how will the pandemic, because the world is changed forever. And I think we need to get that clear. People are kind of expecting, oh, let me wait and see if it will go back to the way it was. It's not going to happen. And if you've looked at, of course, how recessions have changed organizations, this is the most significant one, and we're not going to go back to business as usual. I mean, a lot of the jobs that are gone, they're not coming back. It'll be technology, automation that replaces those jobs, and different apps and so on. So I would encourage you to start actually looking at how can you deliver other value? How have your customers' lives changed? Because everybody has changed. Their needs are different. So you can't use the old strategic plan and then say I'm executing against that. You can't, right? So of course, you may have to look at a new target market. You may have to look at, of course, what's your new pricing strategy, and then how can you get the highest and best return on your resources, every dollar, every resource. I would encourage you to look at applications that deal with all areas of the business. So when you talk about productivity, what are the major applications that you can actually use? When you talk about meeting spaces, what are those applications that you can use? For years, I've actually been using just applications. I was able to, in just 1 year, replace 3 people using one app that cost, under $50 US a month, in subscription, because that app, it has so many different, so it's linked to PayPal, it's linked to Zoom, and so it's linked to the calendar. It's, so I want you to start thinking in terms of how can I use this as a conduit to allow my customers to be able to simply book with me, to be able to ask questions and get them answered, and to continue that engagement, but start looking through from every single level, customer service as well as finance, and then you kind of document what are all those applications and so on that support the new business model.
Just to add, David, I heard what Yannick said. As small business entities, because they have a lack of resources, they need to really sit down and plan and look at where their business is going and where the industry and where the world is going, and then utilize and think about using these limited resources strategically. Look and see where you're performing well at now, and then focus your resources and your time. So you don't spread your resources thinly, because your capacity to actually grow and turn from losses into profit means effective utilization of your resources whilst you are transitioning in this changing environment.
Mel, I would add just a couple of things to that. One of the Achilles heel of small businesses is that they don't track orders well. And so you're used to people coming up to your storefront and you order and you give to them. The other is capturing customer information. Those two things. So what technology does, it gives you an opportunity to make your storefront look as beautiful and as attractive as anybody else. It allows you to become much more professional than maybe when in the physical space. And it allows you to focus on what makes your customers happy. And my final advice to you as a business is you don't want every customer. As a small business, you sometimes focus on grabbing every customer that comes along. Some customers are actually trouble. They divert you from your core business. You don't have spare resources like large companies to be able to do that. So that would be my advice to you, since you were asking about how you turn social media interaction, social media is a tool. Just being on social media in and of itself doesn't mean revenue. But if that interaction is a way to keep your customers informed, deliver services, or focus on more speedy delivery of goods, that's what it is. Otherwise, you're just becoming another social media player. You may or may not become popular and get a lot of likes.
And David, if I may just add to that, I mean, it's a good segue for me in the technological space. Today, technology is readily available to small business. 20 years ago, small businesses just couldn't afford the kind of capability that they can today. So there is still that challenge in terms of the embracing of technology, that cultural interface that we spoke about earlier. But technology is cheap, technology is available. Yannick spoke about her being able to get adequate technology for a particular pain point at under $50 a month.
Indeed. All right, Melissa, I hope that answered some of your questions. Who do we have next? Oh, Maurice, you're asking your fellow panelists questions?
No, that's not. That's Maurice.
That's not Mike. That's not Mike.
Oh, it's Maurice. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The other McNaughton. I'm mixing you up. Forgive me. I'm going to pay dearly for this, you know. Because
Yes, you will, but you know what?
I know the difference.
Yeah, he's excited about that, I think. All right, so great question, Maurice. And he asked, of course, what allowed Lego to become a poster child for digital transformation? Well, of course, they started with leadership. I mean, the truth is, what caused that? They were at the brink of failure. They had no choice. Many of our companies are really suffering from comfort. When you're in your comfort zone and there's no urgency, you know, you tend not to actually innovate as much as you could. It's because you're really comfortable. It's the same thing that happens in our personal space. So if you are not at the brink, right, and have that urgency, you usually don't get the best out of yourself, unfortunately. And so what happened was that because they were on the brink of bankruptcy, they had no choice. So it meant that they realized that the current business model was not going to work, and they were forced to look at where, and this is a discipline. I mean, I'm glad that the JC is sponsoring this, because it's a discipline that business owners tend not to have. They don't have the discipline of looking at their investment in a way that is, you know, independent and divorced of the passion with which they started. So they don't have the discipline to say, okay, where in the world are people getting the highest and best return on their investment now? And then kind of say, okay, well, this then becomes the barrier that of course I have to overcome if it is that I'm going to put my dollar here. So it really is, I love that highest and best principle, because it really forces you to think differently and then to start looking globally and say, okay, so who is making the most money in each industry? You know, it's a basic thing. And what they did was they realized that where it was entertainment and content, and that's where they would make a lot of money. And that's how they, of course, became the poster child. In addition to training and upskilling their staff, they had to let go a lot of people. They had to bring on a lot of people to kind of get them up the learning curve very quickly. And again, not say, oh, we're hiring a digital transformation manager. That was just that's like not the way to go.
And just to add there, Yannick, you said that you're glad that the Jamaica Stock Exchange is here. That is what my research has shown. It has given a strategic pathway to enable business owners to actually go through step by step in deciding when they're looking at their company. Are they in cash crisis? Are they experiencing losses? So therefore, they were looking at their strategy. Where is the source of decline? Is it the change in external environment or internally? And that, therefore, they get a pathway in terms of this is what you need to first to recognize that you're experiencing decline. Do you have a cash crisis? Therefore, you do financial restructuring. And then you look and say, where's the source of your decline? So you look at your industry, you look at your peers, you look internally, and you go through the various pathways. And then you look, do you have the resources? Do you have demand for your product? Because demand for your product can be your way of doing business now. You can transition it into another industry. And in so doing, you have transitioned yourself. And that is what Lego and others have done. Although they were on the brink, they had a a discipline. And this is what the Jamaica Stock Exchange companies have shown us, and it has been brought out in my research. So therefore, there is a model for this and for the SMEs and other companies to follow.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question here. And this is from Jimmy Moss Solomon. Hi, Jimmy, who is one of the brain, this is one, it's a brainchild of his, along with, I believe, Jackie and Janice Henlin. So Jimmy is asking, will there come a time when digital transformation affects human interaction in a way that will cause another pivot? Don't all jump to answers. All right, I'll take the first stab at it while everybody goes through it. So Jimmy, every transformation affects human interaction because the transformations take place only if humans agree that this is what they want to do. So if we take buying books, for example, before Amazon, you went to a book chain, Waterman, Barnes & Noble, Kingston Bookshop, Time Store. You probably had a desk, you sat down, you could browse through a reading copy. It was a very social interaction. You got your book and you're proud to go to the bookshop. Then came Amazon saying, don't do that, go online. And Barnes & Noble fought it for quite a long time, but Amazon won because that's what people wanted. And, you know, while people bemoan the loss, certainly in industrialized countries, of the bookshop on the corner where you met up and had a very social interaction, more people valued the efficiency. And it happens in so many ways. Now I no longer want to go into the bank. In my mother's generation, they knew every teller, they knew their bank manager by name. It was a family affair. You took half a day off or more to go to the bank to socialize with your friends, and the bank employees became your friends. You would walk through the door and they'd know what your transactions were before you reached the teller line. Today, we do that digitally and we want digital currency. And I think that is the tension about these pivots. And COVID-19, not so much a digital transformation in itself, but the necessity of a pandemic has changed the supply chain in agriculture, in manufacturing, right? In education, where we pivoted in 1 month from exclusively face-to-face to exclusively online, something that we'd been debating the merits, plus or minus, for quite a while before. And this is the lot of human beings. The wheel caused us to pivot, fire caused us to pivot. The first, second, third, and now the fourth industrial revolutions will cause us to pivot. And I sense beneath your question, Jimmy, is what does that do to us culturally, socially, and spiritually? And those are sometimes the questions that we don't answer. And again, going back to the US election of 2016, the great Midwest was what had powered the second industrial revolution and was thought to have been behind the rise of the US as a great power in the 19th and 20th century. Then it became the Rust Belt, and the people revolted and brought in a great disruption to the political force. So it has caused, so that technological and industrial pivot that sort of decimated wide swaths of Middle America caused another pivot politically. And I think that's a part of it that we don't speak about as much. What's the human and social cost of the pivots, even for the people who embrace the pivots to begin with. So that's sort of my take on the question. And
if I can just add, just based on my experience after being quote unquote in your home during the pandemic, after it was officially over, you actually enjoyed some amount of human interaction outside of your family. So I'm thinking of whilst this digital transformation, whilst the COVID-19 will create changes, I believe there needs to be some balance between, there needs to be some human interaction, because socially, spiritually, and emotionally, you receive energies from other person. So whilst we should be embracing digital transformation, I believe even at the workplace and in how you do your business, I believe a business should offer two methods or avenue to even offer their business services, because at the end of the day, you need social interaction, because we can't display love without seeing someone else. Even you can do it over technology, but an aspect of it is also human interaction. So we don't want to negate the benefits of digital transformation, but human interaction is important. And therefore, if we're not careful, the next pivot will be us needing more human interaction. That's my.
Well, unfortunately, from my perspective, being immersed in technology, and I've already spoken about all the positives associated with digital transformation. But Jackie, unfortunately, the human interaction will get less and less. Right? People are getting snippets of information and they're interacting each other using snippets of information rather than reading a book. Let's use that as an example. People are sitting together, interfacing with each other, and they're focused on their cellular phones. So it is something that will happen, right? And we basically just have to find ways of ensuring that we maintain the soft side in terms
That
of
is what I was speaking
with our peers and our colleagues and our friends. But that level of interaction will continue to get less and less.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Michael on that the level of interaction will get less and less. But Jimmy, I'm really grateful for the question, because it allows us to zone in on something that we haven't discussed, which is I really think that we may see a pivot because of how digital transformation is showing up and exacerbating two things. One, income inequality, right? And of course, how many people are disenfranchised, because what we're seeing is that the wealth gap is widening. We're seeing that people's access to basic social services, health, education, we're seeing where these structural inequalities in our society are really shown up in a significant way when it comes to not just the pandemic, but of course, who has access to technology, where were they on the learning curve, and how is this then changing the transition of wealth, and unfortunately, how is it affecting different sectors? So I do believe that it is likely that we may have a significant pivot because of not just human interaction, but more importantly, what is happening socially.
Thanks, Unique. Funny how time flies when you're having fun. But we'll be having our last question. And that comes from Claude Robinson. Hi, Claude. Claude's question is, I would like to hear something more on financing the transition, especially for small and medium-sized companies. Is this debt or equity or both? Who wants to take that one?
All right, I'll take a stab. I'll take a stab at it. So Claude, that really would be personal to the companies themselves. I mean, equity is always cheaper in the short run, but longer, but more expensive in the long run. Debt has its own challenges in terms of constraints on particularly small and medium-sized businesses as they grow because the debt has to be serviced. So, I mean, the ideal situation is to look at a mix of debt and equity. And equity, I always recommend when I'm talking to businesses that when they're considering equity, it's not just a cash injection. Consider equity investments from persons who will be adding value to your business based on their knowledge base, based on their own experiences. And then it will literally be a win-win.
And that specific question deals with financial restructuring. So as what Michael said, it depends on your risk appetite of your company, and also it depends on why do you want equity, why do you want injection? So therefore you look at either debt or equity, and if the shareholders that you're taking on, are they bringing value to the company? And also, what is the value proposition of your company? Can it stand the test of time to regarding either debt or equity? And in so doing, along with your financial advisor, you can then ascertain and then decide on whether it is debt or equity towards actually utilizing this injection to actually grow the business, and not just use it to do other personal financing, because it is very important to help SMEs and other companies transition from small to even moving from a small entity to a medium-sized entity. Capital injection, whether debt or equity, can assist, but strong financial management and discipline is needed throughout the process.
Yeah, I would agree with all that has been said before. I think in an ideal world, as Michael said, it really would be great if there was enough equity to go around. But I think that access is going to be a major issue. And, it also depends on the business model. I mean, there's some, digital transformation in some companies requires significant patient capital, right? It's also risky, depending again on the business model. And so, it is always specific to the company. It is always specific to the business model. And more than ever before now, it will also be specific to the capital market.
Claude, I'd like to add a wrinkle to that. Sometimes it's neither. A lot of times it's about the choices you make with the resources you have. So sometimes people already have all of the productivity software. They're just not using it in a way that facilitates digital transformation in there. So you have a website, but what you're doing with it, you're taking orders. Is it linked back to the accounting system you already have, or the order system that you already have? Take a look at how you're spending and on what it is that you want to do, and are all your activities adding value. So sometimes that transition doesn't need a lot of debt or equity, but what it needs is a lot of thinking about why you're doing what you're doing. And so this brings us to the end of our panel discussion and questions. I want to thank the audience, and in particular, I'd like to thank the panelists. So Yannick Page, Andre Gooden, Jackie. But my tongue just got tied up, Jackie, with your name, so I leave it alone for the time being. Michael. I'd also like to thank the team behind this. So our marketing team led by Janice Henlin, Stephian and Justine and Dawn, technical support by Brian Hall and Omar and their team, and Omar for fielding the questions. And of course, we thank our partners at Jamaica Stock Exchange. And Michael, thanks for making the offer that we'll most certainly be taking you up on and building that out to help a select few small businesses, go through this transformation. I think we had a question from an entrepreneur who was actually here, Mel. So Mel, if you're running a business, you might not make the technology transfer depending on what you're doing, but you can reach out to us and to all the other small business operators who are in this forum as well. We know it's not easy, we know it's challenging times, and we are here to try and bring and share this type of information. It's one in an ongoing series, and we invite you to check regularly on our website or join our mailing list. Something we want to recommend, Business Risks and Opportunities. We have put out an e-zine, and Claude Robinson is the editor for this. And it's full of very interesting information. And we invite you to visit our website, msbm-ue.org. And you can go /MSBM e-zine or follow the links. You'll also find information on our podcasts and webinars on that site. Also, we have our UE Venture Competition webinar, and the one coming up next week, Wednesday, will be with David Mullings, Chairman and CEO of Blue Mahou Capital, looking at entrepreneurial finance. So again, a good segue from our last set of questions for those of you who are looking at how do you fund startups in particular. We ask you to, you're welcome to come there, and you can go to our website for more information on how to do that. So once again, thanks. And again, it was remiss of me. I'd like to thank the people who really coordinate this, in particular, Jimmy Moss Solomon, our executive in residence, which is another innovation we have at MSBM. Very few, if any, business schools have this, where we take experienced executives who join the business school when they have a little bit more time, usually at the end, when they decide to end their formal career. And so Jimmy Moss Solomon is one of our executives in residence and helps us form those bridges between academia and the business community. Our other executive in residence is Harry Smith, who well known to most people, marketing guru that helped build the brand Digicel, and is currently the chairman of Digicel Jamaica. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we hope to see you in our next series. And have a safe time. As they say in colloquially, COVID no stop keep. So please be safe. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.